Hi, my name is Catherine Wilson. Um, Most of you probably know me, maybe some of you don't. I am soon to be 59 years old, and until I was 50, my past was on a need to know basis, and unless I was sleeping with you or you were my shrink, you did not need to know. Now, occasionally, my reaction to things back a few years ago would be shocking, like if somebody came up behind me and I would scream, jump 3 feet in the air, and and so I would have to say something. So I would just say, "Hey, I was raped." Don't talk about it, but that's why. I don't say I was raped numerous times, hogtied, beaten, choked to unconsciousness, or anything like that. I just said enough that my over crazy reaction was understandable. Um, but really, most of my people in my life just didn't need to know my past, and so I didn't share it. When I was almost 50 and I was volunteering at a jail for kids, I was faced with the reality that my past story could help other people who have been victimized to have hope. I was so busy, healing everything that had been done to me and then learning how to be a human being. I guess I just never realized that there were a lot of other people out there who've had awful things happen, who were struggling with getting on the other side of it, even believing that they could get on the other side of it. Can't even imagine that they could be sexual without flashbacks, or just sexual at all, or trust humanity at all, or believe that their internal suffering would have an end, or they could do life without drugs and alcohol, or, and offer some understanding through education for people who didn't understand how this could even happen in a society. How are children being sexually abused? How are people being lured into sex trafficking? And is that even a thing? And what is it? I didn't really realize that I could be a force for good in education and helping turn the dial a little bit in my community and hopefully beyond. More importantly, offering hope for fellow survivors with concrete, here's a smorgasbord, a whole buffet of self-help tools that I have learned over decades of living this life, that could really help people. I didn't really get that, nor was I ready to do that until I was almost 50. And then in doing that, I tried to join different organizations who were doing work with survivors in my community, but we had a different perspective on what that help looked like. They had their way, their language for doing it. And as a thriving survivor, I had my language and my way of doing it. And so I felt like I needed to do my calling in the way my heart led me to do it. So that was not the easier way because my way was in a little tiny shed beside my house, working by myself. And the good thing about working by myself, for the most part, I had some amazing friends who were willing to read through my blogs and edit for me, and other people that I could hire for some videos to try to educate, or different things. But for the most part, it was me in my shed. And the good part about that was I got to do the last 8 years the way that I felt led to do it. The hard part was I did not have a team that I could use their resources. I could cover my weak areas. I could, from a mental health perspective, be able to talk about some of the hard things. There's hard things, and things that would get triggered in me. I've done a ton of work, but I still have wounds like everybody else. And sometimes if somebody would hurt my feelings, or I would come across a difficult case, or I worked really hard with a survivor who went back out, which happened numerous times, the loss of my soul sisters like Dee, not having that team to be able to process with was a challenge for me. The frustration, it's hard for survivors who have interesting relationship with money and sex to go out in the world and try to raise money to be able to educate people on money and sex. Right? That was or when somebody who uses prostitutes on a regular basis makes a donation that is less than what he paid for the last prostitute. You just like shake your head, right? The lack of collaboration, competition instead of collaboration was just crazy making. Organizations that say they are, all for supporting sex trafficked survivors, yet are on the forefront of trying to make prostitution legal, calling it sex work to make it not sound so bad, when all the evidence nationally and internationally say wherever prostitution is legal, sex trafficking is higher than anywhere else. And then being at the State House side by side with them, and the sex traffic survivors like Dee and myself are saying before the panel, as survivors, we're saying, please don't make this legal. And then some of the other organizations who are getting millions of dollars in funding are saying, we think it should be legal. There are just so many things that were just sort of, you can't make sense out of nonsense, just sort of mind-blowing. So many people having difficulty getting their head wrapped around me competing as a professional athlete, and saying you can't be on stage in a bikini for a bodybuilding competition and be somebody who's an advocate for sex traffic in the world of sex trafficking. And I'm like, what about a Olympic volleyball player or Olympic swimmers? Or, it has just been such an interesting ride over the last 8 years, almost 9 years. The people who haven't really supported, and the people who have, that just in and of itself, the people that, how the universe just shows up. I'm raising, in 2019, it was a 3-day in-person child sexual abuse prevention conference, the first one that we did. And it was really important to me, unlike some other organizations who charge for tickets for stuff. And that was not how I wanted to play. I wanted I wanted the community, donations through the community, to fund a love offering. Like, let's educate our community so we understand what the Atlantic magazine called a pandemic, long before COVID, a pandemic of child sexual abuse in our country. Like, understanding the domino effect of when you abuse or neglect a child, what that snowball looks like. It is, if you Google adverse childhood experiences, Oprah talked about this 3 years ago on 60 Minutes. There is so much research that they can predict generally the significant decrease not only in mental and physical health in children who are neglected, but the significant decrease in years of life. When we look at a community and we say, okay, what are the biggest bummers in that community? Addiction, kids dropping out of school, kids incarcerated, violence with children, sexual abuse of children on children, sex trafficking, suicide, like so many things. When we look at all of that and we say, okay, what is the common theme? It comes back to those children being sexually abused. When we look at our leaders and we're like, these people are batshit crazy, right? When we look at, leaders with where we work, the people who are frequently sick at work, there's always some trauma happening. The frequent flyers in hospitals, the people who are constantly showing up and clogging the ERs because they can't get their blood pressure under control, they can't get their blood sugar under control, they can't get their pain under control. All of these people, like this 10% of all these different groups, have all the same thing in common. They have a high ACE score. They have high trauma that they had when they were a kid that is playing out as adults. So if the vast majority of the crap that's going on all come from the same root cause, then we need our community to understand that. If they don't understand it, they're busy plugging holes, but they're not stopping what's causing the holes to begin with. So I thought, if I could just put the pieces together, and I akined it to, I don't know if you remember in the 80s when they had those posters and it would have like the number 16 or, some sort of face, but you had to stare at the poster long enough and finally you could see it. And then once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it, but like was forever like staring. Can you see it? It's the same thing. I felt like I could help with that aha moment. I could help with being able to see the unseen so that you can never not see it again if I could just educate people in the way that worked for them. So I learned this in sales. I learned that when I was doing a sales presentation, I needed to speak, the people who were at the table, I needed to speak the language of HR. And that person is really concerned about how to attract employees and how to keep employees, right? And then the tax attorney, he wants to know, hey, what are the tax laws on this program you're proposing? And what's the history of it? And what are the consequences? And what are the guarantees? And then the employee wants to know. So like each person at the table, you have to speak the education at where they're coming from. So I thought, okay, when I educate our community, I want to make sure I bring my A team. Jonathan Sarbeck, our Cumberland County District Attorney, has never said no to me. If I'm speaking to a bunch of men from the Knights of Columbus or the Eskimo Club or little old ladies in York County or the art group or a middle school, we had 70 teachers at a middle school, or if it, whatever it is, he always said yes, he always showed up. If it, maybe it was Peter DiMarzio, the Homeland Security Victims Protection Agent for Homeland Security, or it was Jennifer Wiesner to take the shame out of Maine and explain children and their sexuality and healthy sexuality and how do you teach them, right? So all these different people I would bring in for free to educate our community for free, and then wanting to do an even better job and reach even more people by doing conferences. And we've done 4 of them. We did one that was really understanding what is the world of child abuse. The 3-day, all of them except for this last one were 3 days. We did one where we had 690 participants on that, where we educated attorneys, we educated social workers, we educated teachers and advocates. Crucial, being able to say, okay, how can we explain trauma? After when COVID hit, how can we educate teachers on how to identify abuse when they're doing virtual training, how to look for the blood and missing hair, and is their offender just out of view of the camera, and how to know and what to do, how to set up your classrooms and your offices to be more trauma informed, where kids feel safer and more likely to disclose, how to collect evidence. What sort of things do social workers look for? What sort of things do teachers look for? What sort of things do the police look for? What sort of things do lawyers need to close the case to put the make sure that child is safe? Explaining child advocacy centers. Child advocacy centers are such an asset to every community. Who are they? What are they? How are they? Technology, the last one we did was on technology. Being able to understand how offenders are reaching for children through phones, gaming, computers, and what's their shtick, and how we can look out for it, and how can we keep our kids safe, and just so many ways of educating, covering all the different aspects, and trying to cover those aspects with different people's perspectives in mind to have a more profound and deep and effective educational experience, so they can see and never unsee that again once they're able to see it through being properly educated. The disappointment of trying to get a $10,000 donation from an organization that turned me down not once but twice, saying that education would not stop a child from being abused. Even though the world researcher, Dr. David Finkelhor out of the University of New Hampshire Crimes Against Children Research Lab, said, education is essential. You have to do that, right? It has been such a roller coaster. The working alone in the she shed, being acknowledged by the Portland Radio Group, the 20 Outstanding Women in Maine, amazing. The getting a citation of honor from the Kings County out of Brooklyn, New York, human trafficking group there, huge honor. Being invited to the White House to speak, to be at a round table of different people. I don't know, there's 20 people or so around this table, maybe more, talking about what we believe can be done to help make a significant difference in this topic. That was huge. Being invited to come back as a guest for the 20th anniversary of the Sex Trafficking Victims Protection Act was also an honor. But being asked my opinion, like, that was amazing. That was amazing. And then the backlash from so many people because of who the administration was at the time. Wasn't expecting that. When I put a picture up of me and Ivanka, it was more like she's tall. People telling me that I was as bad as a sex trafficker because I went inside the White House during that administration. Really crazy. Yeah, so many things. So I have so many stories. Beth Peavy, at the time, her last name was Peavy, giving me the opportunity to sit with teenage girls who had been sexually exploited over and over and over and over and over again. That was so meaningful to me. Being with girls who were where I was and being able to read them bedtime stories and hear them say, no one's ever read me a bedtime story before, or disclosing to me what they had never disclosed to another human being before, or me saying things to them and them going, I've been in therapy for 10 years and a therapist has never said that to me, and having a breakthrough. Like, that was an unexpected honor to be able to be in service to them, to have parents have the uncomfortable conversations with their children because of something that they've learned from me or my posts and all that. I didn't know about social media. I still really don't, right? But just posting, and now over the last year, my friend Catherine, who I met in New Jersey, every day on Stop Trafficking US Facebook, she's putting up posts, and people like Kartika and other people sending me stories that I can put up on that Facebook post, just sharing experience, strength, and hope and knowledge about sex trafficking. Sex trafficking was like a blink of an eye in my lifetime. The reason why I called it Stop Trafficking US was because that was the hot topic in 2015. That would get me in the door. And once I would get in the door, I had the opportunity to talk about what mattered to me the most, which was stopping kids from being sexually abused in the first place. I believe, if we want to change the world, the way that we do that is we give children everything they need to cook until they're done, to develop that first 20 years of their life, and of course, from birth to that 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year, that cement gets a little harder each time. And actually, I think it's 27 is when the cement is officially hard and you can't move it anymore. But boy, we have this opportunity, that first couple of blocks of 10 years in a child's life. And once we do that, once we block access from offenders to getting to them, and we give them the food and the education and the love that they need during that time, we can change the world. We can change the world because our world is changed by its leaders. And if we have unhealed, wounded leaders, hurt people, healed people, heal people. And when we're looking at the climate, and here I am on Sebago Lake, I love the climate. I love all my animals. And if you follow me, you know I'm sort of a nut about all my animals. I love all, that's so important to me, and health and well-being, it's all important to me. And for me, my path, my heart's call has been the genesis. How can I help the genesis of all this yucky stuff in our world? If I can have an impact there, then everything else has an exponentially greater chance of healing and becoming functional versus dysfunctional. So that's been my goal. And my first PowerPoint presentation, I think on YouTube, it's my story from teenager to sex trafficked or whatever. That took me 90 hours to do, because I'd never done a PowerPoint before. Right? Everything has been so difficult for me. Just navigating my way around my computer, trying to figure out how to store stuff, my drive, G drive, whatever, and how to organize files, and like all that technology stuff, marketing stuff, PowerPoints. I'm sure there's a way to do a GoFundMe. I'm sure there's a way to do whatever. I hired Regal, and we paid her, I think, $5,000, and she nominated me with the New England Patriots, and we got a $10,000 donation this year, which was amazing. My friend Beth Dolph turned in my name to the Sprague Memorial Foundation, and we got $5,000 last year. I'm sure there's a way of doing. I just don't know how to do any of that. I know that Don Campbell did a thing for cancer, a boat party, and raised tens of thousands of dollars. $30,000 would provide every year an amazing 3-day training with international, national speakers coming, recorded, and use that training moving forward. Like, we could do a kick-ass training once a year, $30,000 a year, boom, boom, boom. I don't know how to throw the party. I don't even do dinner parties. Somebody out there knows how to do it. So Stop Trafficking US's success has been in spite of me, truly in spite of me. It has just been crazy. One of the highlights that I'm so thankful for, Brian Ligotti at Durago Fitness, amazing guy, amazing. Brian funded a survivor to go through beauty school. He and I collaborated together, and a couple years ago on the first year of the pandemic, and together we donated more toys to the child welfare than had ever been donated before in child welfare history here in Maine. That was probably the single greatest joyful moment for me, was all those toys. That was huge. Brian, not even my gym. Brian is just the kind of guy that showed up, right? Just amazing. One of my happiest donations was this lady who got some sort of a dividend check for $100, and she could barely write. Like, she did in cursive, wrote to me and sent me this $100, or the envelopes where there's a $10 bill, or it's just like, that that was significant to that person. It was just unbelievable. Being able to have my husband as a safety net. So his company makes a donation every year, and that covers my overhead stuff. So whenever other people donate anything, it doesn't go to the overhead stuff. Charlie takes care of my computer guy and my lights and my computer and the MailChimp annual fee and all of this stuff. He covers that so that when donations come in, I can use 100% of every dollar for that. This year, it was the highest amount for this this last conference. It was $30,000, and I was $7,000 short. And Charlie's company had already maxed their donation, and I just wasn't sure where that money was going to come from. And a friend of mine, I went to visit a girlfriend of mine, and I don't go to my friends and say, hey, give me money. I don't do that. So, and maybe I should. I just don't feel right about doing that, so I don't do that. And I didn't even talk about the conference. I didn't even say I was short any money. And she's walking me, had a lovely visit, and we're walking to my car, and she said, hey, how much are you short on the conference? And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, 7,000, but I know it will come. And I'm, like hopping in my car. And she said, Rick and I, my husband and I, would like to give you that $7,000 so you've met your amount for the conference. I'm going to cry again. Just amazing how people just showed up. People just showed up. Where that has affected me personally is when a difficult time happens and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how it's going to work out, personally or with the advocacy or whatever, and I say to myself, this is going to work out to my advantage. Like, it's going to work out. It's going to be better than I can imagine. It's going to be okay. And I don't say that because I have a shred of evidence that it is, because 99% of the time I don't. I have no idea how things are going to work out. And it just does. And that has happened so many times. There's 2 homes in Maine for sex trafficked survivors. And when COVID first happened, I did a Zoom once a week with the 2 houses, even though they're independent. We came together for a Zoom. We did an hour and a half a week, and I would have different speakers around the world would call in and share their experience, strength, and hope with the survivors, just to support them while we were all quarantined. And I wanted to do Christmas presents, and I was trying to figure out how to get money to buy them weighted blankets. So there was just a few things I wanted to get them, and there was a guy who at that moment was in the Ukraine, working on adopting a couple of girls that he and his wife had fostered, and he was in Ukraine doing the adoption stuff and said, I want to let you know that I'd like to help with the Christmas presents. Never heard from the guy before. He's not a Maine guy. He lives across the country. Like, he and his wife are amazing people, but I don't know them personally. And he sent me money, And every penny of every dollar he sent went to, Christmas presents. It was just amazing, like amazing. So I know when something happens that, although I don't know how it's going to work out, I'm no longer shocked or surprised anymore, like how it comes. Like, who thought that the New England Patriots was going to give me a $10,000 check? Or Maine Marathon. Maine Marathon, I think the equivalent of $5,000 came in from them. Bob Dunphy was just this amazing guy with the Maine Marathon organization. So cool. So cool. Just, it has been such an interesting ride. It really has. And I have stuff going on and I can't do as much as I used to do. So, this year the big thing was the conference, and I'm wicked proud of it. And it's on the website, so stoptraffickingus.org, under events and then undeletable. You can watch the whole day and a half conference on technology. The Catholic Diocese is already using that material for their training. So cool. Mandatory training on the stuff that you guys donated to, and we offered free of charge. It was $18,000 for AV Technics to do professional quality lighting and recording sound. Worth every penny, but boy, chasing money, I don't like chasing money. It just came. So moving forward, I have a couple of different, how the topics are chosen is based on what is heavy on my heart. Something happens, either somebody asks me, one person all year, one person will say, hey, we need some help in this area. And maybe that's where the topic is born out of, but it's always right on. So I have two more conferences that are on me that I really want to offer to our community. I know exactly who I want to hire, and it will be too virtual. The in-person is too much for me, but the virtual, I can handle that easier. So I think I want to do fundraising differently next year. There's got to be like a really cool party or something that I can do, maybe with Motor Booty Affair, and we can raise the money a different way, or I don't know, I have to figure it out. I went to Trisha Grant did a fundraising event at I think it's called Halo on Thomas Point, and they had a really great band and thousands of dollars. They did a thing on their app, and thousands of dollars were coming in the 15 minutes they announced it. And I'm like, man, I gotta figure, I need to learn how to do this. I need to learn how to throw a party. So if I could figure that part out for next year. Giving Tuesday's coming up, and so we'll see there's got to be a better way of doing what I'm doing. Again, I know there's better ways. I just don't, not my skill set. So I do the best I can, and the best I can is just so far less than what it could be if the right person was doing it. So, so at least 2 more years of conferences, and maybe I'll do 2 conferences this coming year, and that will be it. I don't know. I don't see me doing this forever, but I do want to do these 2 conferences. So that's just a little bit of what's been going on, and I just wanted to share with you. It's a long share, 40 minutes. I'll have to YouTube this, but this has been my experience, and I am so thankful. I'm thankful for every crappy thing, every challenging thing, every amazing thing. What I have noticed, and maybe it's my age, maybe it's my gender, maybe it's nothing, maybe it's just crazy me, but I noticed that, I never did a happy dance. It was like I would reach some goal and I would not bask in the success of it. I would put some pictures up on Facebook and say, isn't this cool? And other people would say, oh, that's great, blah, 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 blah. But I never really allowed anything to sink in, really revel in the success of it. Never did a happy dance, never did a, wow me or anything like that. I would accomplish something like maybe we'll just say the White House or the New England Patriots, and I am on the next thing. I'm on the next thing. So I don't want to be. I just think that there is it is healthy to ring the bell. Ring the bell and celebrate. And not like, this is a trigger for me. I really can't stand anything conceited. So I always stammer and stagger on this. I would love it if there was an accomplishment and with your girlfriends, and then all the girls got together and went out to eat or whatever, and like celebrated together for each person, like where we celebrate each other. Linnell Wilson is somebody who's good to do that with, and I haven't done it. And I would like to figure out how to do that in a way that lets it in, because otherwise it's all a blur. And then, 8 years later, or 3 years later, or 2 years later, I feel like it's too late to celebrate it then. Like you missed your opportunity to celebrate that. I don't know. So here's to the next 2 conferences. One will be on addiction, and one will be on trauma. And that trauma one will be for those professionals, and it will not be public. It will be a very private training, 1-day training on trauma. So people who actually see the children, see the abuse, have to watch the child pornography, that they get the kind of trauma training that could potentially save their life. Suicide rate is really high with those individuals, and I'd like to be able to offer them some resources that they could better handle the trauma that they see in order to protect our children and save our children. So that one's really, we got some great trauma people in Boston that I'd love to bring to the table to train them. So that is on my mind. Anyway, now we're at 45 minutes. Thank you for, if you've made it this long listening to me, thank you. And happy Thanksgiving.